The topic is simple interest. The essential question is, how can you solve simple interest problems? So the amount of money you pay for borrowing money, or the amount of money you earn for letting others borrow your money, is called interest. So here's just a kind of a simple little example of interest. If you have a savings account, you might notice that the bank will put money into your account, just a tiny amount, about maybe every month or every year or whatever they decide. And the reason they're doing that is because they're letting people borrow your money. When your money is in the bank, banks loan out money to other people that need money for certain things. And since your money's already kind of sitting in there, they're loaning it out. And to kind of compensate you for allowing the bank to loan out your money, they'll give you some money in the form of interest, okay? And it's usually just a tiny amount. Another way to look at interest is, let's say you want to go and buy a car, and the car that you want to purchase is just a lot of money, and it's a lot of money that you don't necessarily have the full amount of. So for example, let's say the car costs $15,000, and you don't exactly have $15,000 just in your back pocket. So you would go to the bank and you would ask them for a loan. Well, in that loan, they'll say, here you go, you can have this $15 to buy that car, but for the length of time it's going to take you to pay us, the bank, back, we're going to charge you interest. So just because you borrow $15,000 from a bank doesn't mean you're going to have to just pay them back just $15,000, because they're going to charge you some interest to where you're going to pay them back just a little bit more for them giving you that money up front, okay? So there's two ways to look at interest: when you borrow money and when you let others borrow your money. So since it is a part of the 7th grade math standards, we've got notes on it. So here's an example. Michael borrows $25,000 from the bank to buy a new boat at a rate of 8% interest per year. So Michael wants to buy a boat. He doesn't have this much money to pay it off in full to whoever he's buying it from. So he's got to go to the bank and say, hey bank, I need to borrow $25,000. And the bank says, sure Michael, but we're going to charge you an 8% interest per year. So when you go to pay back the bank, when Michael goes back to pay the bank, he's not just going to pay them $25,000, he's going to pay them that interest rate of 8% per year. So if he pays the bank, if he pays it off in a year or less, then it's going to be a lot better than if it takes him like 10 years to pay back the bank, okay? So anyway, to figure out how much interest Michael owes the bank on top of the $25,000, use this formula. And this is something that you're just probably going to have to memorize if it doesn't come very straightforward to you, okay? It says I is equal to P times R times T. I know this is multiplication because see how the variables are just smushed together? And I realize that there's a lot of variables right there. But here's what the variables represent. That I, that stands for the simple interest. Okay? We're just teaching you simple interest in 7th grade, and obviously it gets more complex as you get older and when you actually start borrowing money. The P stands for the principal. Okay, and look how it's spelled. It's not like the principal of the school, it's principal like this. And what that means is the original amount that's borrowed or loaned. Okay. And that R, that represents the rate as a decimal, okay? So if you have a percentage, you want to write it as a decimal. I should write percentage rate. Okay? And the T represents time in years. So if you have something for 6 months, you would not put a 6 right there, because if you put a 6 right there, that would be 6 years. Since 6 months is half of a year, right here you'd put 1/2 or 0.5, okay? So let's refer back to our example up here. Michael borrows $25,000 from the bank. So that $25,000, is that the interest, the principal, the percentage rate, or the time in years? Well, that right there, that's the principal. That's the original amount that Michael borrowed. So you're going to go ahead and label that. Okay? And he wants to buy a boat, and the bank is going to charge him a rate of 8% interest per year. So this right here, this 8%, that's going to be the rate, the percentage rate. Okay, percentage rate, and we want to write it as a decimal. So 8% as a decimal is 8/100. Okay, let's see here. The time is in years, and look, it is in years right here. So we've got the time. Okay, so let's go ahead and figure out how much interest Michael owes the bank on top of the $25,000. So off to the left is where I'm going to show my work, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this example just like I see it, you know, the equation example. I equals, so the simple interest is equal to the principal times the rate times time in years. And the interest, we don't know that yet. We're going to figure out how much interest he would owe. So I'm going to just keep that as a variable. I'm going to keep that as an I. The reason I'm not using X is because I see that this is already a variable. So I'm just going to keep that, okay? Keep my equal sign. And then the principal, well, the principal amount was $25,000. So I'm going to smush $25,000 in there. And I'm going to multiply that by the rate as a decimal, so 8/100. I'm going to put parentheses right there because I know parentheses means multiply. And then the time was 1 year. Okay, so now all you got to do is, if you could do that in your head, do it in your head. Otherwise, grab a calculator and go 25,000 times 0.08 times 1. And you should end up with your answer of $2,000. Okay? So if Michael was able to pay the bank back the $25,000 in 1 year, he wouldn't just give them $25,000. He would give them $27,000. Because remember, that bank charged him interest for letting him borrow the money. Okay? So for your summary, how are you going to remember the simple interest formula? What ways are you going to memorize this right here? Please write down your strategy of how you will memorize this formula. So you know how I just asked you to write for your summary how you will remember the simple interest formula, and I want to share with you how I have memorized the simple interest formula. Okay, so I just think of like a general question. When someone asks you, hey, what's your simple interest? What are you into? What's your simple interest? And I think of a kid. And I know that kids love to go to birthday parties. So see this little kid right there? He's in that birthday party. He's at that birthday party right there. And he's over there. And you know what his simple interest is? He likes to party. He likes birthday parties. So that's how I remember this formula. And let me kind of explain myself. See the I party. I know it's silly how I remember it, but that's just how I remember it, okay? Because of this kid right here, when he would reply to this question, what's your simple interest? He says, I party. I, which is the interest, is equal to the principal, which is the original amount, times that rate, written as a decimal, times the time in years. If that helps you, awesome. Number 1 says, Alan borrows $1,000 from Miley at a rate of 6 5/10% interest for 2 years. How much interest will Alan owe? So what I want to do is I want to start off by writing down that formula. And I'm going to write it nice and big up here so I can see it. So interest is equal to principal times that rate, written as a decimal, times the time in years, okay? And they're all smushed together, because you should all know that when variables are all smushed together like that, it means multiply. So principal times that rate times the time, okay? And that, when you do that, will give you the interest. So it's asking us, how much interest will Alan owe to Miley? Just the interest, okay? Not the grand total, including the 1,000. No, it's just what's the interest on that? What's the 6.5 of this 1,000, okay? So what we need to do, what's the 6.5% of this 1,000 for 2 years, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and we'll use this as a guide. So that interest equals, well, what's the principal? What was the original amount that Alan borrowed? It was $1,000. And you'll see that I'm color coding it right here, okay? So if you have these matching colors, that would be excellent. But if not, that's okay too, as long as you practice and you understand things. Okay, right here is the rate, and remember, we want to write that as a decimal. So 6.5% as a decimal is this 65, you say the number, 65, and then you say its place value, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, so 65 thousandths. And then the time in years is 2. So now all we simply have to do is just multiply that, okay? So 1,000 times 65 thousandths times 2 is 130. It's going to be $130. That's how much interest Alan will owe. Is that all he has to owe? No, he also owes her that money that he originally borrowed, which answers our next question. How much money should Miley get from Alan after 2 years? Well, of course, she's going to get that $1,000 that she originally gave him. I'm not going to label until the end, okay? So she's going to get that principal amount that she loaned out to Alan. And also, she gets that interest right there, because she didn't have access to her money during that time because, you know, Alan had it. Now, right there is a simple interest. And when I add those two together, you'd get $1,130. That's how much Miley should get from Alan after 2 years. Okay, the next problem. I want you to pause the video and try to answer it yourself. If you get a little stuck, please refer to problem number 1, okay? Alex has $80 in a savings account. The interest rate is 5% for 3 years. How much interest will Alex earn after 3 years? So see, his money is in the bank. The bank is, you know, loaning Alex's money out to other people. So since Alex is letting that happen, Alex gets money in his savings account from the bank, okay? He gets 5%. So let's go ahead and write out that formula. The simple interest is equal to the principal, which is the original amount, times that rate, the interest rate written as a decimal, times the time in years. So we got to figure out how much interest Alex will earn after 3 years. Just the interest, okay? So let's go ahead and substitute the values within our equation. The principal amount, how much did Alex originally have? He had 80 bucks. And that interest rate written as a decimal, so 5% written as a decimal is this. And when I say this out loud correctly, I would say 5, you say the number, and then the place value, 5 hundredths. And the time in years is 3 years. Oh, I forgot to circle that up here if you were stuck. Okay, I just want everything color-coded, so hopefully it helps you. Okay, now I'm just going to go ahead and plug that into my calculator, and I would get the interest that Alex will get after 3 years. When I did that, I got 12 bucks. That's how much interest Alex will get after 3 years on this amount in the bank, in his savings account. Okay, so if Alex makes no deposits, so that means he doesn't put any money in, or withdrawals, which means he doesn't take any money out, how much will he have in his account after 3 years? So what happens to that 80 bucks if he doesn't take any money in or put any money out? Okay, well, you gotta keep in mind he gets this interest, so the amount he would get or he would have in there, he'd have that $80 that he started with, which was the principal. And he would get that $12 also, you know, which was a simple interest he earned. So after 3 years, when he looks at his account balance, he'll be like, whoa, I now have $92 in there, and I haven't even done anything. Okay, without peeking, I want you to write the formula for simple interest. Okay, I went ahead and circled some components in number 3. And it says, what was the principal amount if $150 was earned in simple interest after 5 years at a rate of 10%? So let's go ahead and start off by writing out that equation for simple interest, and go ahead and try and beat me. Write it down before I write it down, see if you have it memorized. It's going to take me a little bit longer because I have to scramble and find my colors here. Okay. So since we're going to be plugging values in right here, it would be a really good idea to, whatever you're using to substitute it in, I want you to write it underneath the variable it represents. So here's what I mean by that, okay? So let's see. Do we have the simple interest already given? What was the principal amount if $150 was earned in simple interest? So that $150 is the simple interest. Okay? So this is a little bit different than the previous problems, because in the previous problems we were looking for the simple interest, but in this one they already gave it to us. Okay, now let's see. The P stands for the principal, which was the original amount. Do we know the original amount? No, it says what was the principal amount. We don't know that, so we're going to keep that as a variable. And I'm going to keep it as a P. I'm not going to change it to X or anything because I'm going to keep it consistent. And then the R represents rate, and you want to write it as a decimal. And I see that the rate is 10%. So 10% as a decimal is 1/10. Or you could say 10/100ths. Okay? And the time was 5 years. Remember, you want to keep it in years. It's already in years, so I don't have to do anything weird to convert it. All right. So you'll see that we are looking for that principal amount. We want to know the original amount. So I hope you remember how to solve for a variable. Right now I can't exactly solve it because I got to simplify all this stuff right here. So I got to go 10/100ths times 5, and when I do that I got 5/10ths, or I could say 50/100ths, times the P, and that's going to equal 150. Now that I have just a variable on one side of the equal sign, now I can solve it. I can build it. So I start with P, and then we multiplied it by 5/10ths. And then the inverse operation to multiply is to divide. So we're going to divide both sides of the equal sign by 5/10ths. Okay? 5/10ths divided by 5/10ths is 1. 1 times P is 1P, or P. Same thing. 150 divided by 5/10ths is 300. Okay, now I got to see how I got to label that. Is that 300 years, 300%, $300? And let's see. What was the principal amount? Oh, so that's money. $300 was that original starting amount. Okay. Number 4 says, if $84 in simple interest was earned on a principal amount of $200 after 6 years, what was the rate? So I want you to start off by writing out that formula. And I really do think it helps writing out every single time for every problem that you're on, just because it's easier to plug the values in when you already have it written out, okay? Okay, so let's go ahead and look through the information here. If $84 in simple interest was earned, so that is the simple interest. There, that's the simple interest. So I'm going to substitute that 84 in for the I. And then what other stuff do we have? Do we have the principal here? Oh, the principal amount was $200. So right here I'm going to put 200. Okay, do I have the rate? Oh, what was the rate? That's asking us the question. What's the rate? We don't know the rate, so we're going to keep it a variable. Then do we have the time in years? Yep, after 6 years. So I'm going to put a 6 there, okay? So this is all multiply, you know, they're all smushed together. Okay, so I cannot build it yet just because I should probably simplify it a little bit. I can go 200 times 6 because it doesn't matter what order you multiply in as long as you keep the signs the same, and that's a positive 200 times a positive 6. So positive 200 times a positive 6, that is what, 1,200, or you could say 1,200 times the r equals 84. Okay? Now that I have it, the variable is on one side of the equal sign and it's all simplified, I can build it. So I start with r, then I just multiplied it by 1,200, and the inverse operation to multiply is to divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by 1,200. So 1,200 divided by 1,200 is 1. 1 times r is 1r, or r. 84 divided by 1,200 is 0.07, okay? Now remember, that's the decimal version of the percent. So for the rate, for that percentage rate, we want to say 7%. Okay, because we multiply that decimal by 100 to get its percentage. Okay, you should try number 5. You should try pausing the video. Simple interest is equal to the principal times that rate written as a decimal times the time in years. Okay, so let's see what we got here. I'm starting here, interest. Do we know the simple interest? How many years went by if the simple interest earned was 225 with the principal? Oh, okay, I forgot the dollar sign. So anyway, so that's the simple interest was this. So underneath that I for the simple interest is 225. And let's see if we know the principal, the original amount. Principal amount, 450. So the principal amount was the 450. So I'm going to substitute that right here for the principal. Now let's find that rate. Oh, there it is. And 2% written as a decimal is 0.02. And when I say that properly, it's 200ths. And do we know the time? It says how many years went by. So that's the hint saying, hey folks, you need to find the time in years. So I'm going to put a T right there, okay? All right, before I can build this, let's go ahead and simplify that. So I got to go 450 times 200ths, and 450 times 200ths is 9. And bring down your 225, and don't forget your T right there, okay? Now we can build it. So I started with T. Then we multiplied it by 9. And the inverse operation to multiplying by 9 is to divide by 9. So we're going to divide both sides of that equal sign by 9. That says divide. 9 divided by 9 is 1. 1 times t is 1t or t. And 225 divided by 9 is 25. Is that $25, 25%, 25 years? Let's check. So t represented the time in years and saying how many years went by. So 25 years went by. Okay. For your summary, how do you know which variable to solve for? Answer that, please. All right, from memory, I want you to write down and label the simple interest formula. So write down what the formula is and label it, okay? All right, now we're going to complete this table. So here's how you read this darn table here. This first column should have the simple interest. Second column is the principal. Third is the rate. And the fourth column is time. So if it helps you can cover up that. So you can just focus in on each row at a time, okay? So for letter A, you need to find the simple interest. But here's all the other stuff that will help you figure it out. Letter B, you need to find the principal, but here's the information that will help you figure that out. C, you're just going to solve for the rate. Remember to make it a percentage. And for D, you are solving for the time in years, okay? All right. So let's see, for letter A, I'm going to start off by writing out the formula. I'm going to write it out every single time. So I don't know the simple interest, so I'm going to keep it as I. Do we know the principal? Yep, it's 50. And then the rate you got to write it as a decimal. So boom, boom, 0.065, 65 thousandths times the time of 6 years. Okay? Go ahead and figure that out. Once you figure that out, write it right there. Okay? Letter B. We are solving for the principal. So we know that the simple interest is $4.50. Oops, I forgot to write the formula. I'm sorry. I hope you remembered. Okay, simple interest was $4.50, or you can write 4.5. And the principal we don't know, so we're going to keep that as a variable. And the rate written as a decimal is 0.07, which is 7/100ths. And the time is 2 years. Okay, go ahead and solve for P, the principal. Once you get that number, you're going to go ahead and put it right there. All right, let's look at letter C. Start off by writing that formula. Okay, and we know that the simple interest is $7.77. The principal amount was $250. And we don't know that rate written as a decimal. We don't know that. Okay, here's where it's tricky. 6 months. Remember, it's got to be time in years. So 6 months, well, that's half of a year. So you're going to put 0.5 or 1/2. Okay, go ahead and solve for R. Once you get R, be sure to convert that into a percentage and put it right there, okay? And D, start with that formula. Okay, and simple interest is $144. Principal is $400. The rate written as a decimal, boom, boom, is 0.09, so 9/100ths. Times the time, oh, we don't know the time, so you're going to solve for T. Once you solve for T, put it right there. And you know how I was kind enough to put it in order as it would match the formula? If you're ever given this on an assessment, they might try to mix up the order here to kind of mess with you. So make sure you have this solid down, like you know what the formula is. So if I wrote for some reason the time first, you would not put time under the simple interest part, okay? Make sure you know your stuff and make sure you're paying attention, okay? All right. For your summary, do you have the simple interest formula memorized? Yes or no? And if not, please memorize it. Okay, I'll be checking your answers. Have a good day. Bye.